The voicemail came in while I was standing in the frozen foods aisle, my phone vibrating against a stack of discount lasagnas I couldn't afford, but kept staring at anyway. I didn't listen to it right away. I already knew who it was from. I knew because my chest tightened before the screen even lit up, because my body always recognized danger before my mind did. It was Christmas week, 3 days before. The store was crowded with couples arguing quietly about pie crusts and grandmothers counting coupons with trembling fingers. I was 30 years old alone and doing mental math on whether I could stretch one paycheck to cover rent, daycare, and the electric bill if I skipped buying myself anything that wasn't strictly necessary. My phone stopped buzzing. I exhaled and put the lasagnas back. I didn't listen to the voicemail until I got back into my car, the heater wheezing like it might give up any second. I sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching my breath fog the windshield. Then I pressed play. "Hi, sweetheart," my mother's voice said, already brittle, already rehearsed. "I don't know why you're doing this, but your sister is devastated. Absolutely devastated. After everything we've done for you. Your father hasn't slept. We need to talk. You can't keep punishing the family like this. Call me back." She hung up without saying I love you. I stared at the dashboard clock until the numbers blurred. I didn't call her back. I put the phone face down and drove home through streets strung with blinking lights that felt less like celebration and more like mockery. That voicemail wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the moment I realized I had already crossed a line I couldn't uncross, a line my family had spent my entire life training me never to even see. My name is Lauren Whitmore. I was 30 years old that winter. I worked in human resources at a mid-sized logistics company outside Columbus, Ohio. I wasn't powerful. I wasn't rich. I wasn't dramatic. I was by every family metric the reliable one. The one who answered texts immediately, the one who picked up extra shifts, the one who covered gaps without asking why they existed, and the one who apparently had become expendable the moment I stopped paying. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with my daughter Ava. She was 4 then, with hair that refused to be tamed and a laugh that came out of her whole body. Her father disappeared before her first birthday, which my family had framed as a personal failure of mine rather than the reality it was. Single motherhood became my quiet penance, proof in their eyes that I owed them something for embarrassing them. My older sister Meredith had never owed anyone anything. Meredith was 34, married to a real estate developer with a smile like polished marble and parents who'd gifted them a house as a wedding present. She hosted Thanksgiving. She posted curated photos. She spoke in the plural, always we, always us, as if her life were a joint venture approved by the universe. I was the background character who made her life easier. It started small. It always does. When Ava was born, my parents insisted I move back home temporarily. That temporary stay lasted 7 months. I paid rent. I bought groceries. I slept in my childhood bedroom while Meredith dropped by unannounced, critiquing my parenting and borrowing money she never repaid. When I moved out, the favors followed me. "Can you put Mom's phone on your plan? It's cheaper with multiple lines. Can you front the airfare for Christmas? Dad will pay you back after the new year. Can you watch Meredith's dog while they're in Napa? You're home anyway." Anyway was my family's favorite word. It erased effort. It erased sacrifice. By the time Ava turned 3, I was paying for my parents' streaming subscriptions, half their utilities, and a temporary loan Meredith took out to cover renovations on her kitchen after a contractor quote came in higher than expected. I didn't even blink when she told me the number. I just asked how she wanted the transfer. That's how they trained me. They never said thank you. They said, "You're good with money. You don't mind. You understand." What I didn't understand, not until that Christmas, was that my value to them had a ceiling, and I had hit it. The first crack appeared at Thanksgiving. Meredith hosted as always. Her house smelled like rosemary and money. Ava and I arrived with a pie I'd baked at midnight after Ava fell asleep. Meredith glanced at it, smiled thinly, and set it aside untouched. Dinner was loud and polished. My parents beamed at Meredith's husband. They asked about his next project, his promotion, his potential move to a bigger firm. They didn't ask me anything beyond whether Ava was sleeping through the night yet. When dessert came out, Meredith handed out small wrapped boxes to everyone but me. "For the family," she said brightly, "just something small." My parents unwrapped scarves. Her husband got cufflinks. Ava got a toy kitchen set, which Meredith made a point of saying she'd researched extensively. "I got nothing." "Oh," Meredith said, noticing my empty hands with exaggerated surprise. "I figured you'd understand. You don't really need anything, right? Everyone laughed. I smiled. I told myself it didn't matter. It mattered. 3 weeks later, the email arrived. Subject line: Christmas plans finalized. Meredith had written it like a memo. Christmas morning at her house, matching pajamas, professional photos, brunch catered, adults only for the main event, she added casually at the end. Kids can join afternoon. Ava was 4. There was no afternoon for her. There was only now. I called my mother. She sighed like I was asking for something unreasonable. Meredith just wants things to look nice this year, she said. You know how she is. And honestly, Lauren, with everything she's been dealing with financially, we all need to support her. Financially. That word rang in my ears. 2 days later, Meredith texted me directly. Since you're not bringing Ava in the morning, would you mind covering the brunch deposit? It's only $3,000 and it would help so much. Only. I stared at the message until my hands shook. For the first time in my life, I typed back 2 words I had never sent her before. I can't. The reply bubble appeared instantly. What do you mean you can't? And just like that, the ground shifted beneath me. I didn't know yet what would collapse, how far the fallout would spread, or how ugly the truth underneath my family really was. I only knew that for the first time I had said no, and nothing in my life would ever be the same again. Meredith didn't respond right away. That should have been my first warning. Instead of firing back with a passive-aggressive quip or a string of guilt-soaked emojis, she went silent. 12 hours passed, then 18. By the next morning, my phone still hadn't lit up with her name, and that silence felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Meredith never went quiet unless she was recalibrating. I was at work when the next move came. It wasn't a text. It wasn't a call. It was an email sent to the entire family thread, including aunts, uncles, and cousins I only saw at funerals and weddings. Subject: so sad this had to happen at Christmas. I stared at my screen as the words blurred together. Meredith wrote about stress, about how hard this year had been, about how she and her husband were carrying so much responsibility for keeping the family together. She wrote about disappointment, about boundaries, about how painful it was when someone you love refuses to step up when everyone else is sacrificing. She never used my name. She didn't have to. By the time I finished reading, my inbox was already filling with replies. I'm sure she didn't mean it like that, honey. Family helps family. Christmas is about giving. Maybe Lauren just needs time to cool off. I closed my laptop and went to the bathroom, locking myself in a stall, even though no one else was there. My hands were trembling, not with anger, with recognition. This was the pattern. When Meredith didn't get what she wanted directly, she reframed the narrative so that I became the problem publicly. She knew I would see it. She knew I would feel exposed. She knew shame worked better on me than confrontation ever had. I didn't respond. That was new, too. I went through the rest of the workday in a fog, answering emails, scheduling interviews, nodding in meetings while my chest felt tight. By the time I picked Ava up from daycare, my jaw ached from clenching it. She ran into my arms smelling like crayons and applesauce, and I held her longer than usual. She wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, "You okay, Mommy?" I lied softly. That night after she fell asleep, I opened my banking app. I don't know what I was expecting. Some hidden buffer? Some mistake? Some sign that I'd imagined how thin things were stretched. But the numbers didn't lie. Rent, daycare, utilities, groceries, gas, student loan payment, the automatic transfers I'd never questioned, Mom's phone plan, Dad's streaming services, Meredith's kitchen loan. I scrolled back through the transaction history, my stomach sinking with each line. Small amounts at first, then larger, then recurring. I did the math. Over the past 3 years, I had given my family more than $40,000. Not lent, given. Money that could have gone into a savings account. Money that could have paid down my debt. Money that could have built something stable for Ava. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark phone glowing in my hands and felt something shift deep inside me. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. The next morning, my mother called. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Lauren," she said immediately, her voice sharp with relief and irritation. "Finally, we need to talk." "I'm on my way to work," I said evenly. "This won't take long," she replied. "Your sister is heartbroken. I don't know what's gotten into you, but this is not like you." There it was. The version of me they preferred. "I can't pay for the brunch," I said. "That hasn't changed." "You can," she corrected. "You're choosing not to." I gripped the steering wheel. "I'm choosing my child," I said. There was a pause, then a sigh. "Lauren," she said slowly, "Meredith has done so much for this family, hosting holidays, keeping traditions alive. You live in that little apartment because you don't make sacrifices the way she does. The words landed harder than I expected. "I live in that apartment because I'm raising my daughter alone," I said. "And because I've been paying for things that aren't my responsibility." Her tone cooled instantly. "So this is about money. It's about respect." She laughed softly, a sound I'd heard my whole life when she wanted to dismiss me without sounding cruel. "You're being dramatic," she said. "This is Christmas. Don't make this ugly." I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I drove to work with my hands steady and my heart pounding, realizing that for the first time I wasn't afraid of their disappointment. I was afraid of what would happen if I gave in again. That afternoon, Meredith finally texted me. I didn't expect the venom to come so quickly. "I can't believe you'd do this to us. Do you know how embarrassing this is? Everyone thinks you're selfish. If you can't support the family, maybe you shouldn't come at all." I stared at the last line. Maybe you shouldn't come at all. The threat was clear. Pay or be excluded. I thought of Ava, of her excitement about Christmas, of the way she'd been practicing saying her cousins' names, of the way she asked if there would be lights. I typed back slowly. "If my daughter isn't welcome, neither am I." There was a long pause. Then Meredith replied, "Fine, do what you want." Christmas morning came and went without us. I didn't see the photos until later that afternoon, when a coworker casually asked if I'd seen my sister's post. Matching pajamas, smiling faces, my parents flanking Meredith like proud bookends. No Ava. I closed the app before my hands could start shaking again. That night, after Ava fell asleep clutching her stuffed rabbit, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and a pen. I didn't write angry letters. I didn't journal my feelings. I made a list. Every expense that wasn't mine. Every favor that had become an expectation. Every boundary I had never enforced. At the bottom of the page, I wrote one sentence. "I am done paying to belong." I didn't know yet how far Meredith and my parents were willing to go to punish me for that decision. I didn't know what secrets were about to surface, or how deeply money and control were tangled in our family's foundation. But I knew this. They thought exclusion would break me. They had no idea it was about to set me free. The first thing that broke wasn't my resolve. It was the illusion of quiet. 2 days after Christmas, my phone started ringing again. Not Meredith, not my mother. Numbers I didn't recognize. Area codes from states I hadn't lived in since college. I let them go to voicemail at first, assuming it was spam. It wasn't. "Lauren," my Aunt Denise said in a tight, unfamiliar voice, "I don't know what's going on, but your sister says you cut her off financially right before Christmas. That you're punishing her kids. Is that true?" Another voicemail followed 10 minutes later. "This is Uncle Ron. Your parents are beside themselves. We're worried about you. Meredith says you're not thinking clearly." By that evening, the messages had turned from concern to accusation. "Family helps family. This isn't how you were raised. Your daughter will regret this one day." I sat on my couch, Ava asleep beside me, listening to the notifications pile up like debris against a door. Meredith hadn't just told her version of the story. She'd launched a campaign. And she was good at it. She knew exactly how to frame things. She didn't say I refused to pay for brunch. She said I withdrew support suddenly. She didn't say Ava was excluded. She said I chose not to come. She didn't say she demanded money. She said I abandoned the family during a stressful time. The narrative was clean, emotional, convincing. I almost cracked. Almost. What stopped me was an email that came in late that night, buried beneath the noise. From my father. Subject disappointed beyond words. I opened it with the dull resignation of someone bracing for impact. "Lauren, your mother is heartbroken. Meredith is under immense pressure, and instead of supporting her, you've chosen to create division. I never thought I'd see the day when my own daughter would prioritize stubbornness over family unity. If you continue down this path, don't expect us to shield you from the consequences." Shield me. I read that line 3 times. That was when it clicked. They weren't just angry, they were threatened. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I logged into my credit monitoring account. I hadn't checked it in months. There had never been a reason to. I paid my bills. I didn't gamble. I lived small and careful. The page loaded slowly. Then my stomach dropped. There was a hard inquiry listed from a financial services company I didn't recognize, dated 3 weeks earlier. Right around the time Meredith had sent the brunch request. Right around the time my parents started talking about restructuring things for the future. I stared at the screen, my pulse roaring in my ears. I hadn't applied for anything. I clicked into the details. The inquiry had been flagged as incomplete, no account opened, but the attempt was there. Someone had my information, my full name, my social security number, my address. My hands started shaking. I called the credit bureau immediately. The woman on the line was calm, professional, and terrifyingly thorough. "Do you recognize the institution that ran this inquiry?" she asked. No, I said. Did you authorize anyone to apply on your behalf? No. She paused. Then this may be attempted identity fraud. We recommend placing a freeze on your credit immediately. I did it without hesitation. When I hung up, my phone buzzed with a text from Meredith. We need to talk. This has gone too far. I laughed out loud. It startled Ava awake. It's okay, baby, I whispered, smoothing her hair. Just mommy being silly. But my chest felt hollow. I replied. Did you try to apply for credit in my name? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. What are you talking about? My fingers moved faster now. There was a credit inquiry 3 weeks ago. I didn't authorize it. A full minute passed. Then her response came. Dad was just exploring options. It wasn't a big deal. We didn't finalize anything. I stared at the words, my vision narrowing. Exploring options. With my identity. Without my consent. You tried to take out credit in my name, I typed. That's illegal. Her reply came instantly. Don't be dramatic. Families do this all the time. We assumed you'd be on board like always. Like always. That was the moment the past rearranged itself in my mind. The kitchen loan. The utilities. The phone plans. The casual way money moved out of my account and into their lives. The confidence with which they spent before asking. The way no one panicked until I said no. They hadn't just relied on me. They had counted on me. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my bank statements and started pulling records. Transfers, dates, amounts. I printed everything, laid it out on my dining table like evidence. By the time Ava came home from daycare, the table was covered in paper. Mommy, what's that? She asked, pointing. Just homework, I said softly. Grown-up homework. That night, I called a lawyer. Her name was Rachel Cohen. She came recommended by a coworker who'd gone through a brutal divorce. Her voice was steady, her questions precise. Has anyone admitted to applying for credit in your name? She asked. Yes, I said, in writing. That's serious? She said. And the financial entanglement you're describing is not normal family support. It's exploitation. The word landed like a gavel. Exploitation. Rachel didn't sugarcoat anything. She explained my options. Credit protection. Cease and desist. Formal documentation. And if I wanted to escalation. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted safety. I wanted distance. I wanted my daughter protected from whatever twisted sense of entitlement had taken root in my family. The next morning, I sent one email. To my parents, to Meredith, to her husband. From now on, all communication must be in writing. Do not apply for credit loans or services in my name. Any further attempts will be documented and handled legally. I will not be providing financial support of any kind. I read it twice, then I hit send. The response was immediate and explosive. My mother called 6 times in a row. Meredith sent paragraphs. My father left a voicemail accusing me of betrayal, of tearing the family apart, of being ungrateful. I didn't answer. For the first time in my life, I let the silence stand. That silence wasn't empty. It was the sound of power shifting. They thought they were entitled to my compliance because I'd never denied it before. They thought my role was fixed, permanent, unchangeable. They didn't realize something else had been fixed too. Their access. And as the days passed and the messages grew more frantic, I understood something that both terrified and steadied me. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control, and I had just taken it away. The retaliation didn't come the way I expected. I was braced for screaming voicemails, for public humiliation on social media, for my parents showing up at my door with red eyes and rehearsed speeches about forgiveness. I was prepared for emotional warfare. What I wasn't prepared for was paperwork. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, slipped under my apartment door while I was still at work. I found it when Ava and I got home, the envelope lying there like something alive, thin and white and deliberate. My name was printed neatly on the front. Inside was a formal letter. Not from a lawyer, from a bank. I sat on the floor, Ava kicking off her shoes beside me, and read it twice before the words made sense. It was a notice of concern regarding a business loan application. My name appeared on the document, my social security number, my old address from before Ava was born. The application had been flagged suspended pending verification, but it existed. Someone had tried again. This time it wasn't subtle. This time it was big. I tucked the letter into my bag and got Ava settled with a snack and cartoons before stepping into the bathroom and calling Rachel. They did it again, I said the moment she answered. She didn't ask who. Email it to me, she said, and listen carefully. This is no longer a misunderstanding. This is a pattern. A pattern. That word echoed as I stood there staring at my reflection, at the dark circles under my eyes, at the version of myself who still couldn't quite believe this was happening. Rachel called me back an hour later. This application is tied to an LLC, she said. Do you recognize the company name? I read it off the letter. Whitmore Family Holdings. My stomach flipped. They used our name, I whispered. Yes, Rachel said. And that tells me something important. They believe you're still theirs, that you won't go nuclear, that you'll absorb this like everything else. I thought of my father's email. Shield you from the consequences. I thought of Meredith's casual families do this all the time. They weren't panicking yet. They were escalating. Rachel walked me through next steps. Fraud affidavit, identity theft report, certified letters, documentation that would make the boundary real in a way words never had. This will change things, she warned. Once this is filed, there's no pretending this is just family drama. I know, I said. That night, after Ava was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table again. Papers spread out, laptop open, pen in hand. I hesitated. Not because I doubted what was right, because I knew exactly what filing those reports would mean. My family wouldn't forgive me. They wouldn't reflect, they wouldn't apologize. They would retaliate, and they would do it the only way they knew how, by destroying my reputation. The first post appeared the next morning. Meredith didn't tag me, she didn't need to. Some people weaponize therapy language to justify abandonment, she wrote. Boundaries shouldn't be used as excuses to hurt children and elders. The comments poured in. You're so strong, protect your peace. Toxic people always play victim. I scrolled with numb fingers. Then came the second post, a photo from years ago. Me holding Ava as a newborn, Meredith beside me, smiling, arm around my shoulders. Caption, I remember when we were close. I missed the sister who loved us. My chest tightened. This was the version of the story she wanted remembered. The benevolent older sister, the ungrateful younger one who changed. I didn't respond. Instead, I filed the reports. Credit bureaus, bank fraud departments, a formal identity theft affidavit. Every click felt like crossing another invisible line. By noon, my phone was vibrating nonstop. My mother left a voicemail that was pure fury. How dare you involve outsiders, she snapped. Do you have any idea what this could do to your father, to Meredith's family? You are selfish beyond belief. My father's message came next. This is your final warning, he said. Withdraw the report, fix this quietly, or don't expect a place in this family ever again. I sat at my desk at work, the phone in my hand, and felt something unexpected. Relief. Because there it was. The truth finally spoken out loud. My place in the family had always been conditional. As long as I paid, as long as I stayed quiet, as long as I didn't ask for anything back. The moment I became inconvenient, I was expendable. I didn't reply. That evening, Rachel called. The bank froze the application, she said. They're investigating. Whoever submitted it is scrambling right now. Good, I said. You should prepare yourself, she added. Once this lands, they may try to spin it as you being unstable, overreacting. They may even suggest you're unfit. My breath caught. Ava, I asked. They could try, Rachel said gently. It doesn't mean they'll succeed, but you need to be ready. That night I barely slept. Not because I was afraid of losing, but because I was finally seeing how far they were willing to go. The next morning, my daycare provider pulled me aside. Everything okay? She asked hesitantly. Why, I said. She lowered her voice. Your sister called, she said. Asked about Ava, about your schedule, about whether you seemed stressed. The room tilted. What did you say? I asked carefully. That it wasn't appropriate, she replied, and that Ava is happy, safe, and well cared for. I thanked her. I smiled. I waited until I was in my car to let my hands shake. They were testing me, probing for weaknesses, looking for leverage. That was when I understood something crucial. This wasn't just a family drama anymore. This was a power struggle. And Meredith had just made a fatal mistake, because while she was busy crafting narratives and playing victim online, she'd forgotten something about me. I worked in human resources. I knew documentation. I knew patterns. And I knew exactly how systems responded when someone crossed from emotional manipulation into measurable abuse. That night, I opened a new folder on my laptop. I titled it simply, Timeline. Dates, messages, screenshots, voicemails, financial records. I didn't rush. I built it carefully, like something meant to last. Because I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was preparing to end this. And once it ended, there would be no rewriting what they'd done. Not by them. Not by anyone. The first formal letter arrived on a Friday. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to my employer. I didn't know that until my manager, Karen, asked me to step into her office late that afternoon. Her voice was neutral, but her eyes carried a weight that made my stomach drop before I even sat down. We received something unusual, she said, sliding a single-page document across the desk. It was printed on cheap letterhead. No law firm, no official seal, just words. Concerned family statement. My name appeared in the second paragraph. So did phrases like emotional instability, financial distress, and concerning behavior affecting a minor child. I felt cold. Karen watched my face carefully. This didn't come from anywhere official, she said. But when something like this references an employee and a child, we have to at least ask. I understand, I said, and my voice didn't shake. That surprised me. The letter didn't accuse me of anything concrete. It didn't need to. It was designed to plant doubt, to make someone wonder whether there was more beneath the surface. Meredith knew exactly what she was doing. Is there anything you want to tell me? Karen asked gently. Yes, I said. This is retaliation. I told her everything, not emotionally, not defensively. I told it like a report. Dates, amounts, credit inquiries, fraud attempts, the lawyer, the filings, the daycare call. Karen listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. Thank you for telling me, she said, and for documenting it. I almost laughed. Documentation. The one language Meredith didn't speak. That evening, Rachel was furious in a way she hadn't been before. They crossed a line, she said. Contacting your employer is intimidation. We escalate now. I didn't hesitate. The cease and desist letters went out the following Monday. Certified mail. Signature required. One to Meredith. One to my parents. One to Meredith's husband. The language was precise. No further contact with my employer, my child care provider, or my professional network. No false statements regarding my mental health or parental fitness. All communication to go through legal counsel. Rachel didn't threaten. She stated consequences. The response was immediate. My mother emailed first. You've turned this into a legal nightmare. I don't recognize you anymore. My father followed. You're tearing this family apart over money and pride. Your sister is inconsolable. Then Meredith. I can't believe you do this to me. After everything, you're punishing me for being successful. You're jealous and you always have been. That one made me pause. Not because it hurt, because it was projection so naked it was almost embarrassing. I didn't reply. 2 days later, the bank investigation concluded. Rachel called me while I was on my lunch break sitting alone in my car. They confirmed the applications were submitted from an IP address registered to your parents' house, she said. They're closing the case on your end. No liability to you. And on theirs, I asked. She inhaled. The bank flagged it as attempted fraud. They'll decide whether to pursue further action. I closed my eyes. This was the moment where I could step back, offer an olive branch, beg them to stop before it got worse. It was also the moment where I understood something else. They hadn't begged me to stop. They'd demanded. That afternoon, Meredith posted again. This time she was subtler. A photo of her kids. Caption about resilience, about teaching children forgiveness when adults disappoint them, about how some people confuse boundaries with cruelty. The comments were full of praise, but something had changed. A few people asked questions. What happened? This seems vague. Hope everyone's okay. Meredith replied to none of them. That evening, my Aunt Carol called. Not accusing, not pleading, just quiet. I don't know what's true anymore, she said. But I know your parents have been asking people for money. My chest tightened. For what I asked? Carol hesitated. They said they're in a temporary bind, that you cut them off unexpectedly, that Meredith's business plans fell through. Business plans. That was new. After we hung up, I pulled out my laptop and did something I should have done years earlier. I searched public records. Meredith's husband's development company had quietly dissolved 3 months earlier. No announcement, no explanation, just filings. They weren't hosting lavish holidays because they were thriving. They were hosting because they needed the image, because appearances were currency. And I had been one of their biggest investors without ever knowing it. The brunch deposit, the kitchen loan, the utilities, the phone plans. I hadn't been supporting family. I had been propping up a facade. I sat there, the pieces finally aligning, and felt something unexpected. Not anger, vindication. The next morning, Rachel emailed me a draft. It was a formal notice, not a lawsuit, not yet, a statement of record. It outlined the financial contributions I'd made, the unauthorized credit attempts, the defamatory communications, the employer contact. It concluded with one sentence. Any further interference will result in immediate legal action. I approved it without changes. The letters went out, and then something remarkable happened. The noise stopped. No posts, no emails, no calls. Days passed. Then a week. I started sleeping through the night again. Ava laughed more. The knot in my chest loosened. I thought foolishly that it might be over. It wasn't. Because when people like Meredith lose control privately, they don't retreat. They regroup. And the regrouping, I would soon learn, would be louder, uglier, and far more public than anything that had come before. But this time I wouldn't be reacting. I would be ready. Because I had something Meredith never expected me to have. Proof and patience. The regrouping began with an invitation. It arrived in my inbox on a quiet Sunday morning, buried between grocery coupons and a daycare reminder. The subject line was almost polite. Family meeting. No sender name, just my father's email address. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Lauren, your mother's health has been affected by all this stress. We need to resolve things as a family privately and respectfully. No lawyers, no accusations, just a conversation. Meredith and her husband will be there. This is your opportunity to fix what you broke. Fix what you broke. I forwarded the email to Rachel without responding. Her reply came 10 minutes later. Do not go alone, do not meet privately. If you go at all, it's on your terms. I didn't want a meeting, I wanted distance. But I also understood something else now. Silence had unsettled them. Evidence had frightened them. A face-to-face meeting was their last attempt to reassert dominance. If I refused, they would spin it as avoidance. If I went unprepared, they would ambush me. So I replied, I will attend. Public location. Written agenda in advance. No discussion of my employment or my child. The response was immediate. This is ridiculous. Why are you being so hostile? We're your parents. I didn't engage. 2 hours later, a follow-up arrived. Fine. Community Center on Maple Street, Tuesday evening. I read it once and closed my laptop. That afternoon, I sat on the floor with Ava, building a lopsided tower out of plastic blocks. She knocked it over and laughed unbothered by collapse. Mommy, she said, why don't we see Grandma anymore? The question landed softly and painfully. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, I said carefully, and they need time to think about how to be kinder. She considered that, then nodded. Okay. She went back to her blocks. I wished adults were that simple. Tuesday evening arrived cold and gray. I dropped Ava off with a friend and drove to the community center with Rachel's words looping in my head. I brought my folder. I brought my phone charger. I brought a calm I hadn't known I possessed. They were already there when I arrived. My parents sat together, my mother clutching her purse like a life raft. Meredith and her husband sat across from them. No one smiled. We didn't hug. That alone felt like the victory. My father cleared his throat. We're glad you came. I came to listen, I said, not to be blamed. Meredith rolled her eyes. There you go again. Rachel had warned me about this moment. The opening move, undermine my tone, frame me as aggressive. I didn't react. My mother spoke next. Your sister has been under tremendous strain. You cutting off support so suddenly. I didn't cut off support, I said. I stopped unauthorized access to my finances. Her mouth tightened. You're splitting hairs. No, I said evenly, I'm stating facts. Meredith leaned forward. You always do this. You hide behind technicalities instead of acknowledging how much we've done for you. I almost laughed. How much you've done for me, I asked. Would you like me to list the amounts or the dates? Her husband shifted in his chair. That's not necessary, my father snapped. It is, I said. Because this meeting isn't about feelings, it's about behavior. Silence fell. I opened my folder and slid a single page onto the table. It was a summary, clean, organized, unemotional. These are the financial contributions I've made over the past 3 years, I said. Voluntary, undocumented, and unreimbursed. This is the attempted credit application in my name. This is the letter sent to my employer. These are the posts implying I'm unfit. My mother started crying. Meredith scoffed. You're making this sound so sinister. Because it is, I replied. My father's voice hardened. You're blowing this out of proportion. Families borrow. Families help. Families don't commit fraud, I said. That did it. Meredith stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. You think you're better than us, she hissed, because you read a few HR manuals and hired a lawyer. You're not special, Lauren. You're bitter. I stood too. No, I said quietly, I'm done. My mother looked up eyes wide. Done with what? With being your solution, I said. With being your buffer. With being the person you spend before you ask. My father's face went red. You owe us respect. I gave you money, I said. For years, that was your version of respect. Meredith laughed sharply. So what now? You're just cutting us off, pretending we don't exist. I met her eyes. No, I said, I'm setting terms. That got their attention. I took a breath. You will not contact my employer. You will not contact my childcare provider. You will not use my name, my credit, or my history for any financial purpose. You will not discuss my mental health or parenting publicly or privately. And if we don't, Meredith challenged, then I proceed legally, I said, without warning. My father slammed his hand on the table. You wouldn't dare. I didn't raise my voice. I already have. That was when something shifted. They weren't angry anymore. They were scared, because they could hear it now. The finality, the absence of negotiation. My mother whispered my name like a plea. Lauren, she said, don't do this. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth I'd been avoiding my whole life. She didn't want reconciliation. She wanted control restored. I already did, I said softly. I gathered my folder and walked out without another word. The cold air hit my face like a baptism. I sat in my car for a moment, hands on the wheel, heart pounding, and felt something unfamiliar bloom in my chest. Peace, not relief, not triumph. Peace. I didn't know yet how Meredith would retaliate. I didn't know how ugly it would get. But I knew this. They had lost their leverage. And once that happens, people who survive on power don't walk away quietly. They strike. The next move would be theirs. And I was done underestimating how far they would go. The strike came disguised as concern. It was a call from Child Protective Services. I was at work when my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Something made me answer. Ms. Whitmore, a woman asked, calm, professional. This is Officer Helen Marks with Franklin County Child Services. I'm calling regarding a report made about your daughter. The room tilted. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. I walked into an empty conference room and shut the door behind me. What kind of report? I asked. A welfare concern, she said evenly. Allegations of emotional instability, financial distress, and an unsafe environment. I closed my eyes. There it was. The final weapon. Who made the report? I asked. I can't disclose that, she replied. But I want to be clear. This does not mean we believe the allegations. It means we're required to follow up. I sat down hard. When I asked, today, she said, we'd like to schedule a home visit this evening. I thanked her. I hung up. And for the first time since this began, my hands shook violently. Not from fear for myself, from rage. Because they had crossed the one line I had warned them never to cross. They hadn't just attacked me. They had gone after my child. I called Rachel immediately. Her response was immediate and lethal in its calm. They did exactly what we expected, she said. Good. That means they're desperate. This could take Ava away, I said, my voice breaking despite myself. It won't, Rachel said firmly. Not if you do exactly what I say. She told me what to prepare. Documents, school records, pediatrician notes, proof of income, proof of stability, screenshots, the timeline folder. Do not contact your family, she added. Do not warn them. Let them hang themselves. I left work early. I picked Ava up from daycare with a smile I had to force into place. I took her home and cleaned like my life depended on it, not because the apartment was unsafe, but because the ritual gave my hands something to do. Ava watched me confused. Are we having company? She asked. Yes, I said gently, but everything is okay. At 6 p.m, there was a knock on the door. Officer Mark stood outside, clipboard in hand. She was younger than I expected. Kind eyes, no judgment. She walked through the apartment, asked questions, took notes. Ava showed her her toys, her drawings, her bed. She's very articulate, Officer Mark said, smiling. She always has been, I replied. When the questions turned to finances, I handed over my folder. I anticipated this, I said quietly. She raised an eyebrow and flipped through the pages. Her expression changed as she read. Not dramatically, subtly. This is extensive, she said. I was warned, I replied, that my family might try this. She looked up. You have legal counsel. Yes. She nodded. The visit lasted 40 minutes. At the end, she closed her folder and met my eyes. I don't see any safety concerns here, she said. I'll be closing this as unfounded. I felt my knees go weak. Thank you, I whispered. She hesitated. Off the record, she added, false reports can carry consequences. I knew exactly who those consequences were for. The moment she left, I locked the door and slid down against it, breathing hard. Ava wrapped her arms around my neck. Are we okay? She asked. Yes, I said, holding her tightly. We are very okay. After she fell asleep, I opened my laptop and emailed Rachel. It's done. Report unfounded. Her reply came back fast. Good, now we counter. The next morning, Rachel filed a formal complaint. False reporting, harassment, retaliation. The documentation was airtight. By noon, my father called. I didn't answer. My mother texted. We didn't mean for it to go that far. Meredith emailed. You forced our hand. I forwarded everything to Rachel without replying. That afternoon, Meredith posted again. This time she went too far. She wrote about being afraid for children trapped in unstable homes, about how silence enables neglect, about how she'd done the hardest thing a mother can do. Protect other children. It was vague. It was sanctimonious. And it was legally reckless. Rachel saw it before I did. That's defamatory, she said, and it's public. By evening, a formal demand for retraction was sent. 24 hours later, Meredith's post was gone. So was her account. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was fallout. Family members stopped calling. Friends stopped commenting. The narrative Meredith had built began to crack under scrutiny. Because people ask questions when authorities get involved. And once they do, lies collapse quickly. 2 days later, my father emailed again. Short, controlled, afraid. We need to talk. This has gone too far. I didn't respond. Because he was right about one thing. It had gone too far. Just not in the direction he thought. They had gambled everything on the assumption that I would fold. Instead, they had handed me the proof that would end this permanently. And now, whether they liked it or not, there would be consequences. Not emotional ones, legal ones. The kind that don't care who you are at Thanksgiving. The kind that don't forgive. The kind that finally even the score. The consequences didn't arrive with sirens or court dates. They arrived quietly through the systems Meredith had always believed she controlled. The first crack showed up in my inbox on a Wednesday morning, disguised as a forwarded message from Aunt Carol. "Lauren, I thought you should see this. I don't know what's true anymore." Attached was an email Meredith had sent to a group of extended relatives. Not the sanitized social media version, not the poetic vagueness. This one was desperate. She wrote about money, about loans that fell through, about investors backing out unexpectedly, about how unfair it was that family support had vanished when she needed it most. She asked for help, directly. I read it twice, my heart pounding not with fear but with recognition. This wasn't new behavior. This was just the first time she'd had to do it without me. By noon, Rachel called. "I just got off the phone with an attorney representing Franklin Community Bank," she said. "They're reviewing multiple flagged applications connected to the same household." My stomach tightened. "Multiple?" I asked. "Yes," she replied, "not just yours." The pieces slid into place with a sickening clarity. My credit hadn't been the only one tested. It had just been the safest. Rachel continued. "They've opened an internal review. And because of the false CPS report and the employer contact, your case is now being treated as retaliatory fraud." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "They did this to themselves," I said quietly. "They always do," Rachel replied. That afternoon, Meredith's husband called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Lauren, this is getting out of hand. Meredith is spiraling. The banks are asking questions. We just need you to make this right." Make this right. I deleted the message because I finally understood something essential. They didn't want peace. They wanted the old system restored. The system where I absorbed the risk and they kept the image. That evening, my mother showed up at my apartment, unannounced. I saw her through this peephole, standing there with her purse clutched to her chest, eyes red, mouth set in a familiar line of practiced suffering. I didn't open the door. She knocked again. "Lauren," she called softly, "please." Ava was coloring at the table. She looked up at me, confused. "Who is it?" she asked. "No one," I said gently. "Just a mistake." I walked into the bedroom, closed the door, and waited. My mother knocked for 10 minutes. Then she left. I sank onto the bed, shaking. Not because I wanted to give in. Because I finally saw her for who she was. Not a victim. A courier. 2 days later, the real blow landed. Rachel called early, her voice sharper than usual. "The bank filed a report," she said. "And because the attempted applications involved false representations and multiple identities, they escalated it." To whom I asked, already knowing the answer. "Federal investigators." I closed my eyes. This had crossed a threshold none of us could uncross. "They're looking at your parents' address as the originating point," Rachel continued. "They'll likely request interviews, records, devices." I pictured my father's home office, the old desktop computer he refused to replace, the filing cabinet full of outdated documents and passwords written on sticky notes. I felt no satisfaction, only inevitability. That night, Meredith finally broke silence. She emailed me directly, bypassing the lawyer for the first time. "Lauren, please. We didn't think it would go this far. Dad is sick with worry. Mom can't eat. This isn't what we wanted." I read the email slowly. "They didn't think it would go this far. They never do." I typed one sentence. "You chose this when you tried to take from me without consent." Then I stopped. I didn't send it, because responding was no longer necessary. The next week unfolded like a quiet implosion. Meredith's husband's former business partners distanced themselves. Invitations dried up. Phone calls stopped being returned. My parents' bank froze their accounts temporarily pending review. My Aunt Carol called again, her voice low. "Something is wrong," she said. "Your parents are asking to borrow money, a lot of it. They say it's just until things settle." I felt a dull ache in my chest. "Don't give them anything," I said gently, "please." She sighed. "I won't. I just wanted you to know." That night, I tucked Ava into bed and sat beside her longer than usual. "Mommy," she said sleepily, "are you mad at Grandma?" I chose my words carefully. "I'm not mad," I said. "I'm just keeping us safe." She nodded, accepting that the way children do when they trust completely. After she fell asleep, I sat alone in the living room and thought about the cost of all this. Not the money, the grief. The grief of realizing that the people who should have protected me had been willing to destroy me instead. The grief of understanding that love in my family had always been conditional, and that I had finally failed to meet the price. The following Friday, a certified letter arrived from the bank. They thanked me for my cooperation, notified me that the investigation was ongoing, advised me to retain all records. Attached was a single line that made my breath catch. You may be contacted as a witness. A witness, not a suspect, not a participant. A witness to what my family had done. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my folder. That was when I felt it. Not triumph, not revenge, closure. Because the story had shifted. This was no longer Lauren versus her family. This was the truth versus a lie that had finally grown too big to sustain itself. And lies, no matter how carefully curated, always collapse under their own weight. The only question left was how loud the collapse would be, and who would be standing when the dust settled. The first interview request arrived on a Monday morning, delivered with bureaucratic politeness and unmistakable gravity. It wasn't from the police. It wasn't from Child Services. It was from a federal investigator. I stared at the email for a long time before opening it, my coffee going cold beside me. The subject line was neutral, almost gentle. Request for voluntary statement. That word voluntary was doing a lot of work. I forwarded it to Rachel immediately. Her reply came back within minutes. This is expected. You're not in trouble. We prepare. You do not go alone. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon at a federal building downtown. I took the day off work. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to be present, focused, clear. That morning, I dropped Ava off at daycare and kissed her forehead a little longer than usual. I'll pick you up early, I told her. Okay, she said, already running toward her friends. Her trust steadied me. Rachel met me outside the building. She wore a navy blazer and the calm expression of someone who'd done this many times before. This isn't a trial, she said as we walked through security. It's fact-gathering. You tell the truth. You answer only what's asked. Inside the room was small and plain. 2 investigators sat across from us, a man and a woman, both professional, both unreadable. They asked me to confirm my name, my address, my relationship to the individuals under investigation. That phrase made my chest tighten. Under investigation. They didn't say family. They said individuals. They asked about my finances, my credit history, the unauthorized applications, the timeline. I answered calmly, precisely. I didn't editorialize. I didn't vent. I handed them copies of everything. The woman nodded as she flipped through the documents. You've kept excellent records, she said. I had to, I replied. No one else was going to protect me. There was a pause. Then the man asked the question I'd been bracing for. Have you ever given verbal or written consent for your parents or sister to apply for credit loans or financial instruments in your name? No, I said, never. Did they ever imply that they had the authority to do so? I thought of Meredith's text. Families do this all the time. Yes, I said, repeatedly. They exchanged a glance. The interview lasted an hour. When it ended, the woman closed her folder and looked at me directly. Thank you for your cooperation, she said. You did the right thing by documenting early. I didn't ask what that meant. Rachel and I walked out into the cold afternoon air without speaking. Only when we reached the parking lot did she exhale. They're building a case, she said. Against them, I asked. Yes. I nodded. That night, my father called again, from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Lauren, his voice cracked. Please, this has gotten out of hand. They're asking questions. We need to talk, just you and me. I deleted the message, because talking had never protected me. The fallout accelerated after that. Meredith's husband's name appeared in public court records, connected to a civil suit filed by a former partner. I learned about it from a co-worker who recognized the name and asked me carefully if we were related. I'm not involved, I said, which was true. My mother stopped showing up to church. My father resigned from a volunteer board he'd served on for years. People noticed, and when people notice, they talk. One afternoon, Aunt Carol called again. They're telling people you're mentally unstable, she said quietly, that you imagine the fraud, that you're vindictive. I felt something inside me finally settle. Let them, I said. She was silent for a moment. Your mother called me crying, she added. She says you're destroying the family. I closed my eyes. No, I said softly. I stopped enabling it. That weekend I took Ava to the park. The sun was weak but warm enough to feel like a promise. She ran ahead of me, chasing pigeons, laughing. I watched her and felt the weight of the past months lift slightly. This was what mattered. Not the opinions, not the posts, not the narrative wars. Just this. When we got home, there was another letter waiting. This one was from a law firm representing Meredith and her husband. Rachel read it before I did. They're attempting to negotiate, she said flatly. They want you to sign a statement retracting your fraud claims in exchange for an apology. I laughed. It surprised both of us. No, I said. They're scared, Rachel replied. And they should be. The following week, the second interview request came. This time it was not voluntary. Subpoena. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the word until it lost meaning. Rachel was calm. This means the case is moving forward, she said. You're still a witness. A witness. I thought of all the years I'd swallowed things, all the moments I'd chosen quiet over truth, and I realized something profound. For the first time in my life, my voice mattered more than my compliance. That night, Meredith emailed me again. Not angry, not accusatory. Broken. "Lauren, please, I'm begging you, if you love me at all, make this stop." I stared at the message. I thought of the CPS call, the employer letter, the credit applications, the posts. Then I closed the email without responding, because love does not look like extortion. 2 days later, my parents' accounts were officially unfrozen. But with restrictions, they couldn't open new lines of credit. They couldn't move large sums. The system had tightened around them. And systems once alerted don't forget. The last call came from my mother's number, not blocked. I answered. She was crying. "They say we might lose the house," she said. "Is that what you want?" I took a breath. "No," I said, "I want you to stop hurting me." She sobbed harder. "I don't understand how it came to this," she said. "I did. It came to this," I replied, "because you thought I'd never say no." I hung up. That night after Ava was asleep, I sat alone and let myself grieve. Not the family I had, the family I never really did. But grief, I was learning, was not the same as regret. And as the investigation moved forward, one truth became undeniable. The tables had turned, not because I pushed them, but because they finally collapsed under the weight of what they'd built, and I was no longer underneath it. The day the indictment rumors started circulating, I was folding laundry. It felt absurd, the contrast between the ordinary and the catastrophic. Ava's socks in mismatched pairs, tiny shirts with cartoon animals, the hum of the dryer filling the apartment with warmth. I almost missed the email notification on my phone because my hands were buried in fabric. I didn't open it right away. I finished folding first. That was the kind of person I had become, someone who finished the small grounding tasks before opening doors that might change everything. When I finally picked up my phone, the message was from Rachel. "We need to talk. Call me when you're alone." I stepped into the bedroom and closed the door. "They're preparing charges," she said without preamble when I called. "Not finalized yet, but the U.S. Attorney's Office has taken interest, especially because of the false CPS report layered on top of the financial fraud." I leaned against the wall and slid down until I was sitting on the floor. "Against who?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Your parents and Meredith's husband," she said. "Meredith herself is in a gray area. It depends on what they can prove she knew and when." My chest felt hollow. "And me?" I asked. "You're still a witness," Rachel said firmly, "and frankly a strong one." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time staring at nothing. This wasn't the justice fantasy people imagine when they talk about revenge. There was no dramatic courtroom scene yet, no gavel, no satisfying declaration. There was just the quiet knowledge that my family was now afraid in a way they had never been before. And that fear had teeth. 2 days later, Meredith showed up at my work. Security called me down to the lobby. "She says she's your sister," the guard said. "She's upset." My first instinct was to say no, to tell them to escort her out, to keep my carefully rebuilt life sealed off. But something in me wanted to see her, to see what desperation looked like when stripped of performance. She was sitting on a bench near the elevators when I arrived. No makeup, hair pulled back carelessly. Her hands were shaking. She stood when she saw me. "Lauren," she said, voice cracking, "please." I crossed my arms. "You're not supposed to be here." "I know," she said quickly. "I just needed to see you. They're talking about charges, about prison. Dad is losing it. This has gone too far." I looked at her. Really looked. She didn't look powerful, or polished, or victorious. She looked small. "This went too far when you tried to have my child taken from me," I said quietly. She flinched. "That wasn't supposed to happen like that," she whispered. "It was just supposed to scare you, to make you come back to the table." I felt something crack inside my chest, not anger, something colder. "You tried to ruin my life to get money," I said. "And you're surprised it didn't stop where you wanted it to." Tears spilled down her face. "You don't understand," she said. "Everything is falling apart. The business, the house, the loans. We were counting on you. You always came through." There it was. The truth she had never said out loud. "You didn't see me as family," I replied. "You saw me as insurance." She shook her head violently. "That's not true." "It is," I said, "and you proved it." She reached for my arm. I stepped back. "Lauren, please," she sobbed. "If you tell them you exaggerated, if you say it was a misunderstanding, we can fix this. I'll apologize. I'll do anything." I felt a strange calm settle over me. "I already told the truth," I said. "That's not something I can undo." Security cleared his throat behind us. "Ma'am," he said gently to Meredith, "you'll need to leave." She looked at me one last time. "You're destroying us," she said. I met her gaze. "No," I replied. "I stopped letting you destroy me." She walked away without another word. I stood there for a moment, then went back upstairs and finished my workday. I answered emails. I scheduled interviews. I drank water. Life continued. That night, my father emailed me. Not angry, terrified. They froze the line of credit on the house. They're talking about foreclosure. Your mother is sick. If you have any mercy left, help us. I stared at the screen. Then I typed, I have mercy. I just don't have money or lies to give you anymore. I didn't send it. I didn't need to. 2 weeks later, the formal notice arrived. Rachel came over that evening. We sat at my kitchen table while Ava slept. They've been charged, she said quietly. Conspiracy to commit bank fraud, false reporting, additional civil exposure. My throat tightened. Will they go to prison, I asked. Possibly, she said. Or plea deals. Restitution. Probation. It depends. I nodded. I thought I would feel vindicated. Instead, I felt tired. Deeply bone-weary tired. Because justice doesn't erase grief. It doesn't give you the family you deserved. It just stops the bleeding. In the days that followed, my parents stopped contacting me altogether. Meredith's name disappeared from my phone entirely. The noise died down. The community moved on. And slowly, quietly, my life began to feel like my own. One evening, Ava crawled into my lap while we watched a cartoon. Mommy, she said, are we safe now? I kissed the top of her head. Yes, I said, we are. And for the first time since that voicemail in the frozen foods aisle, I knew it was true. The storm hadn't just passed. It had burned itself out. All that was left was the ground beneath my feet. Solid. Finally. Mine. I thought the worst part would be the confrontation. I was wrong. The worst part was the quiet. After the charges became public, there were no more frantic calls, no more manipulative emails, no surprise visits to my workplace. The noise that had filled my life for years vanished almost overnight, leaving behind a silence so complete it rang in my ears. Silence forces reflection. And reflection is where the real reckoning begins. The first sign that everything had truly changed came in the mail. Not a legal notice, not a letter from a lawyer. A simple envelope, my mother's handwriting unmistakable even before I turned it over. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the kitchen counter for 2 full days as if it were radioactive. Ava asked about it once. Is that from Grandma? She said, peering up at me. Yes, I answered honestly. She thought for a moment. Do we have to read it? The question pierced me. No, I said, we don't. But on the third night, after Ava was asleep and the apartment was dark except for the lamp by the couch, I opened it. There were only 3 sentences. I don't recognize you anymore. You've humiliated this family beyond repair. I hope one day you understand what you've done. No apology. No mention of Ava. No acknowledgement of the lies, the fraud, the terror they inflicted on me as a mother. Just blame neatly folded into polite cursive. I felt the old reflex rise in my chest, the instinct to explain myself, to justify, to soften the edges, to make her understand. Then something extraordinary happened. The reflex passed. It didn't grab hold of me like it used to. It floated up, lingered, and dissolved. I folded the letter back into its envelope and slid it into a drawer I labeled in my mind. Not evidence, not memory, but closure. Some people don't change. They just lose access. A week later, the community reacted. People I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembered my existence. Old friends, distant cousins, acquaintances from childhood. Messages arrived wrapped in concern and curiosity. I heard what happened. Are you okay? I always knew something was off with your parents. Some were genuine. Some were voyeuristic. Some were fishing for gossip. I answered only the ones that felt safe. I learned quickly that you don't owe everyone your story just because it happened to you. The hardest conversation came from an unexpected place. My grandmother. She was my mother's mother, nearly 80, sharp-minded, and until recently fiercely loyal to her daughter. She called one afternoon while Ava was coloring at the table. I won't stay long, she said. I know you don't want to hear from family. That's not true, I replied carefully. I just don't want to be hurt anymore. She sighed. I didn't raise your mother to be this way. I closed my eyes. She learned it somewhere, I said. Silence stretched between us. I read the charges, she continued. I didn't want to believe them. But I've seen this pattern before. Your grandfather did similar things. Not the fraud, the control. My stomach tightened. She learned it from him, my grandmother said softly. And she taught it to your sister, and they tried to pass it to you. I swallowed. You broke it, she said. The words landed heavy and strange like a mantle being placed on my shoulders. I'm not calling to defend her, my grandmother added. I'm calling to say I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry I didn't protect you when you were younger. Tears slid down my face, silent and unrestrained. Thank you, I whispered. After we hung up, Ava looked at me. Why are you crying, Mommy? Because sometimes people say the right thing, I said, even if it's late. She nodded, accepting this with the wisdom of a child who had already seen too much. The legal process crawled forward. Plea negotiations, court dates, settlement talks. Rachel handled most of it. I stayed informed but distant. I had learned the cost of living inside the storm instead of building shelter outside it. Meredith eventually took a plea deal. She avoided prison but lost her professional license and most of her social standing. The business collapsed. The house went into foreclosure. My parents weren't so lucky. They avoided jail time due to age and health, but were ordered to pay restitution they would never fully manage. Their financial world shrank to something fragile and exposed. They were no longer powerful, and power once lost reveals character. They never apologized, not once. That more than anything told me I had made the right choice. One night, months later, I stood in front of the mirror, brushing my hair, studying the woman staring back at me. She looked older, not worn, weathered, like someone who had survived a storm and learned where the ground was solid. I thought about the girl I had been, the one who believed loyalty meant endurance, that family meant tolerance, that love meant sacrifice without limit. She had been wrong. Love has boundaries. Family is a privilege, not a right. And sacrifice is not love when it is demanded instead of chosen. I turned off the light and went to bed, Ava already asleep beside me, her small hand curled against my arm. "Mommy," she murmured, half dreaming, "you stayed." "Yes," I whispered, "I always will." And I meant it. For her. For me. For the woman I had become by choosing myself when no one else would. The storm had taken a lot from me, but it had given me something priceless in return. My life. My voice. My spine. And the unshakable knowledge that I no longer belonged to people who mistook control for love. One chapter remained. Not the loud one. The quiet one. Where survival turned into something stronger. Freedom. The first time I woke up without dread, it startled me. No tightness in my chest. No instinctive reach for my phone to check for messages that might ruin the day. No rehearsing conversations that hadn't happened yet, but probably would. Just morning light through the blinds and Ava's soft breathing beside me. For years, peace had felt temporary, conditional, like something borrowed that could be taken back at any moment if I failed to perform, failed to give, failed to comply. This peace stayed. It settled in my bones slowly, cautiously, like a wary animal testing whether it was safe to rest. It was. Spring arrived without ceremony. The city softened. Trees bloomed. Neighbors chatted longer on sidewalks. Life moved forward without waiting for my family to catch up. One afternoon, I ran into Meredith at the grocery store. Not the dramatic encounter people imagine. No shouting, no tears. We both froze by the produce section, hands hovering over separate displays of apples. She looked thinner, older, stripped of the confidence she once wore like armor. She nodded once. So did I. Nothing more needed to be said. Closure doesn't always come with conversation. Sometimes it comes with mutual recognition that the bridge is gone and neither of you is crossing the river again. At work, I was offered a promotion. Not because of sympathy, not because of what I survived, because I had become sharper, more decisive, less apologetic. I stopped over-explaining. I stopped softening my language to make other people comfortable. I trusted my instincts, the same ones I'd been trained to ignore growing up. The irony wasn't lost on me. The traits my family exploited were the same ones that made me effective once I stopped letting them be weaponized. One evening, I received a message from an unknown number. I knew before opening it who it would be. "Your mother's health is declining. She keeps asking for you." I stared at the screen for a long time. Old versions of me would have panicked, would have rushed to fix things, would have sacrificed myself on the altar of obligation. Instead, I typed a response I'd rehearsed in therapy and journaling in quiet moments where truth finally had space to breathe. "I'm sorry she's unwell. I'm not able to be part of that relationship. Please respect that boundary." I sent it. Then I blocked the number. The guilt came as expected, but it didn't take root, because guilt only thrives when boundaries are new and shaky. Mine were reinforced now, anchored in hard-earned clarity. Weeks later, Ava brought home a drawing from school. It was a picture of our apartment, stick figures holding hands, a sun in the corner. Underneath, in uneven letters, she had written, "This is my family." No grandparents, no aunts, no cousins. Just us. I taped it to the fridge and stood there longer than necessary, letting the weight of that settle. Children don't need perfect families. They need safe ones. That summer, we took our first real vacation. Nothing extravagant. A small rental near the coast. Sand between our toes. Cheap takeout eaten on a blanket while the sun dipped low over the water. One night, Ava asked a question I had both feared and prepared for. "Why don't we see Grandma and Grandpa anymore?" I took a breath. Sometimes I said carefully, "People hurt others and don't want to say sorry or change. And when that happens, it's okay to step back to stay safe." She considered this. "Even if they're family." "Yes," I said, especially then. She nodded, satisfied. That was the moment I understood something profound. The cycle didn't break when I stood up to my parents. It broke when my daughter learned that love doesn't come with fear attached, that she doesn't have to earn safety, that she doesn't have to disappear to keep the peace. Months passed. The legal cases faded into background noise, then into history. Names I once flinched at became distant, powerless echoes. I filled my life with new rituals: Sunday pancakes, evening walks, books read without interruption, friendships that didn't require explanation or justification. I learned to rest. I learned to receive without suspicion. I learned that revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes revenge is simply living well without the people who tried to break you. On the anniversary of the day everything collapsed, I took Ava to the park. She ran ahead laughing fearless. I sat on a bench and watched her heart full in a way I had never experienced before. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was building. Not a perfect life, a real one. Grounded, honest mine. That night, after Ava fell asleep, I stood by the window and looked out at the quiet street below. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who thought endurance was virtue, the one who mistook guilt for love, the one who believed silence was safer than truth. She didn't fail. She survived long enough to become someone stronger. If you're listening to this story and you recognize yourself in it, let me say this clearly. You are not cruel for choosing yourself. You are not selfish for refusing to be used. You are not broken because you walked away from people who share your blood but not your values. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to rebuild. And you are allowed to be at peace. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, I invite you to share where you're listening from in the comments. These stories travel farther than we think. And if you believe in justice, growth, and the quiet power of a woman who finally says enough, please like this story, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is not what you take back. It's what you refuse to give ever again.